welcome everyone to the Lebanon Planning Commission meeting. It is Monday, April 18th, 2016, and we will begin with roll call.
You'll have to excuse me if I mess this up. This is my first time performing in the roll call duties, but I'll give it my best shot here. I'm filling in for Christy this evening. Gordon Perry.
Here.
Keith Campbell. Dick Robertson.
Here.
Welcome to the Planning Commission, Dick.
Oh, thank you.
Bob Waples.
Here.
Kevin Krulik. Jack Bland.
Here.
Lori Gross.
Here.
And we will start out with Rachel. Do you have something for us?
Yep. Approve the minutes.
Oh, yes, I did. We'll start out with the approval of the minutes. Is there a motion for approval or corrections? Motion to approve. Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion and second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? Motion carried. Okay, now Rachel.
Okay, you're ready for me now. Just for the record, I'm Rachel Cardis with the City of Lebanon Planning Department. The case before us this evening is 1604. The applicant is Bob Lieberman, representing Meadow Wings Residential Subdivision. The subject, Section 3C, is located on the northwest portion of Meadow Wings Subdivision. Section 3C contains 6 acres, presently zoned SF3 zoning district. The action requested before you this evening is Section 3C in the northwest quadrant of Meadow Wing Subdivision. Section 3C contains 23 lots. TAC reviewed this item and had the following comments. City of Lebanon Utilities, Sewer and Water Division, the proposed project has been reviewed by Bob Waples of Lebanon Utilities. At this time, a preliminary review of the proposed infrastructure connection has been done. The applicant is required to pay the required tap fees at the time of the platting of this. City of Lebanon Stormwater, Meadow Wing Subdivision has received formal drainage approval for the entire major residential subdivision. City of Lebanon Fire Department, in review of the proposed 23 lots, the City of Lebanon Fire Department has confirmed the existing fire hydrants are in place to serve the subject 23 lots. City of Lebanon Street Department, the lots have been approved per the street infrastructure back in 2005. They were installed and improved to the public standards and were dedicated as private streets. City of Lebanon Planning Staff Review has reviewed the Section 3C and finds compliance with the secondary plan review standards required by Section 9.9-C4 of the Unified Development Ordinance. And lastly, under staff recommendation, in review of the submitted Section 3 secondary plat as presented, Lebanon Planning Staff finds compliance with the Unified Development requirements for the request. Lebanon Planning Commission recommends approval of the Section 3C secondary plat contingent on the following condition, that it's recorded in the Office of Recorder in Boone County. We do have one additional condition we'd like to put under staff recommendation, and I would like to read a letter we received from an adjacent property owner into the record. Excuse me. Staff received this after packets went out. It was received per our Planning Commission rules of procedure greater than 5 days ago. So we're going to read it into the record, and I'm going to make sure that we address the issue in it that has been corrected by the applicant, Bob Lieberman, who's in the attendance this evening. So it is from Lorraine Cole. It was written on April 4th, 2016. Unfortunately, it was sent to Bob Waples' office instead of the Planning Commission office, so it was a delay in us getting in the information, but it is within the 5-day requirement. So as set forth, I'm going to read it into the record. Dear Lebanon Planning Commission, I am writing in reference to the certified letter I received dated March 22nd, 2016 from the City of Lebanon Planning and Zoning Office, informing me as a neighboring property owner of a public hearing on the application for a secondary plat on the approval of 18th of April 2016 at 7 p.m. I am unable to attend this meeting in person. However, I would like to voice my objection concerning Mr. Lieberman representing Meadow Wings Subdivision. Request based on the attachment describing the Meadow Wings property. The legal description of the property mentions a cross-reference to a survey plat prepared by Anderson Associates, dated October 13, 2003. My objection to this survey is not the most recent survey of the property which sits adjacent to my property. An agreement with Mr. Lieberman representing Forest Oaks Incorporated, known as Meadow Wings, was signed on September 20th, 2010, changing the boundary line between my property and the property mentioned above. This is not something I'm saying. There's a little bit of a derogatory sentence here. I'm just going to leave it out of the record towards Mr. Lieberman. The point of the letter is to note that there needs to be a correction to the reference of the instrument number in the legal description per the agreement from September 2010, not the original 2003 instrument number recorded. So with that, the last sentences are enclosed. Therefore, a description of the survey from 2003 is not the correct property description and cannot be used in planning. Thank you, Lorraine Cole. So with that letter, I did contact the applicant, Mr. Lieberman. He has corrected this and found the instrument number that's been recorded in 2010. It is referenced on a revised survey that's been provided to our office this evening. Mr. Lieberman's in attendance. He can provide the letter in response that he submitted to our office to correct this issue. So I just want to mention in here that there wasn't a letter of issue from Lorraine Cole. It's been corrected, and I want to duly note it in the file.
Can you point out the little
Sure.
area that we're looking at? I mean, because this has already been approved partially before, so.
If everyone can turn, is this working? Okay. If everyone can turn to page 4 of 5, you can see it's probably the first sector here where it says the Cole instrument number 003928. This has actually been corrected and will be instrument number 003939, which is referenced in the corrected version in our office. But that was the issue that was brought forth by Lorraine Cole. So, okay. Any other questions for staff at this time about the plat? Okay.
Hearing no questions for staff, we will open it up to the audience. Does anyone from the audience have any questions?
Do you want to hear from him, the petitioner
Oh, yeah,
first?
we
Sorry.
can hear from Bob first if
Sure.
if he wants to go. Where he's going to end up having to make a comment later.
Thank you. I really have nothing to add to what Rachel said, just other than thanking the city of Lebanon for helping us get started up here. And that's about it.
Well,
We want to keep building and have more people who are retiring in Lebanon stay here.
it's good to
So if you have
sound.
any questions,
The instrument number, that it was just.
it was just it was entered at the wrong number and we got
It
it
was
straightened out.
transposed.
It was, you know, it was straightened out.
Doesn't change anything with the property description?
No, they're exactly where they were. It's just the instrument number was incorrectly submitted.
Thank you. Any other questions for Bob? Okay. I think we'll just open it up to the audience then. Anyone from the audience that would care to make a comment? Please,
This is a pictures of the flooding that occurred at.
Ms.
You
Breela,
need to go to the mic.
please speak into the mic and then.
Right there. You can
And
use
tell
that.
us who you are. I mean, you need to verbally go through that, if you will.
And you can put that on the easel. They'll be able to zoom in on it with the camera.
Yeah.
Can I go in there?
You can.
Thank you. I'm Sandy Breedlove, and our property abuts Mr. Lieberman's development on our south border, and it's his north border. And I'm addressing the problems that Lieberman has caused our property. The first problem is about placing a swale between our properties without permission. And number two, changing the elevation of his property, thus changing the previous drainage. With regard to the swale, Mr. Lieberman was clearly told not to place a swale between our properties, to put the entire swale on his own property. He had a whole field. Mr. Hedges, the county surveyor, told me you don't have to share a swale in Indiana. Lieberman went ahead and placed the swale, totally ignoring my verbal instruction not to place the swale between our property and his, and to place the swale completely on his property. The description of the changes in our property and Lieberman's was received and signed by Christie in the Lebanon City office last year. That was for the encroachment hearing. The description of Lieberman's malfeasance was described by the two other property owners involved at the encroachment hearing last year. You, the Lebanon Planning and Zoning Board, passed, the ones that were present then, passed the encroachment when encouraged by Mr. Campbell and Rachel Cardis, who indicated there was confusion about the property lines. Neither my husband or myself have ever signed a release for the swale. There was no confusion about the property line. Lieberman tore down a fence to place the swale. There was two fences. One existed when we bought the property over 40 years ago. It was an old, unattractive condition. And then when Ray, my husband, built a new fence, he put it several feet to the north. So if there were ever any kind of dispute about the property, he wouldn't have to tear the new fence down. I did give Mr. Lieberman permission to tear down the old fence because it was unsightly, but the property line was where the new, at least, it was probably where the old fence was. I don't know for sure. We never delved that deeply into it, but absolutely there was a new fence there. Well, it had been there several years, but it was in good stead. Okay, that's the first thing about the swale. The other problem is changing the topography of the land. Mr. Lieberman raised the elevation of his property across the northern border of his property, and the northern property owners. Part of the change was achieved by using soil he took from the northern property owners without permission. This elevation completely changed the drainage of the land. Previously, our property drained on Mr. Lieberman. We live on a slope. The crest of the slope is in our field, and the slope goes toward 250 to the north, 300, excuse me, to the north, and on Mr. Lieberman's property, 250 to the south. And a slope can cause a lot of problems. The elevation has reversed the drainage for our property. After Lieberman's construction of a double condominium in 2015, there was flooding 30 feet back on our lot. The rain was not the too severe rains that we had last year. It was the first mild rain after the condo was constructed, and he didn't have his drain troughs in. Our property has never flooded on that lot in the 40 years that we have lived here. Flooding is a probability in an ice storm with rain, or a high volume rain, or even when we have heavy snows, which all of those things do occur in Indiana. The east end of the swale is totally inadequate for drainage and highly questionable on the west if the 70% of another condominium is constructed that the city approved. That part of the swale will likely be inadequate. In Indiana, when you change the topography of the land, you have to provide the drainage. If that drainage is inadequate, that financial drainage obligation should not fall on myself or current or future condo owners. In Indiana, I believe that legally you have to divulge problems with a property when you sell it. Therefore, since these problems have been ignored by Lieberman, that will affect the value of this lot. I am requesting that Lieberman's request for the secondary plat application for Meadow Wings subdivision 23 lots be denied until the problem with our property are resolved. It will be, if they build the 70% of the third condominium, it'll be 3 property owners across there. I shouldn't have to hire an attorney for the problems. There was an attorney involved, and people were financially reimbursed for what happened. That we were not involved in that. We refused because of the changes that I've just addressed. The change in elevation is Robert Wapel's office. I checked it last year, and it's 18 inches. Thank you. Bottom line is, when you look at the pictures, the swale was inadequate for even a mild rain. Yeah, it didn't have drain troughs, but when the drain troughs are filled up with snow and ice, it's not going to be adequate either. I don't have an attorney involved now.
Please address the board.
Oh, I'm good.
Okay.
Thank you.
Rachel, do you have any?
Is there anybody else? I don't want to intrude. Anybody want to speak else on public demonstration? Okay. Make sure we have this part here too.
For the commission this evening, I printed out an aerial just to kind of give you a reference for those members that weren't here when we approved section 3B. I just wanted to give you a little bit of a reference point as everybody can see here. If you can look at sheet 1 of 5, roughly about a year ago, the Plan Commission approved section 3B. You can see this is in the northeast quadrant of Meadow Wings subdivision. So just so everybody gets kind of acclimated here, this is the section we're talking about from a year ago. As you can see, this is the northeast quadrant. Ms. Breedlove, that just
Sure. Let down a little,
Move this down.
the aerial, so we can see it.
Oh,
Thank you.
there we go. Sorry about that.
That's fine.
So section 3B is in the northeast quadrant. So as outlined here, as you can see, this is the northeast quadrant. So this was section 3B about a year ago. Mrs. Breedlove, who just spoke, her property sits right here. Roughly a year ago, these issues with the swale, the property line, the topography were raised in the review of that section 3B. Those issues were mitigated. We looked at them, we remediated them. It was dissolved that if Mrs. Breedlove would like to take a civil action against Mr. Lieberman, that was her recourse. Mr. Waples had looked at the swale, he had looked at the topography, and the drainage had been reviewed. So I just want to let you know, it's not that we're not cognizant of the issues, we don't understand what the issues are that Ms. Breedlove has presented. Those were addressed during the section 3 and it still stands for today's 3C. If she would like to seek legal remedy towards Mr. Lieberman, she would have to file a civil suit. So just for a point of reference, we're talking about this section over here in the northwest corner, away from the property this evening.
Rachel, didn't Mr. Lieberman have it resurveyed? And that was,
He did, and what we were talking about tonight with Maureen Cole, there were certain property acquisitions made in 2010 along these three property owners as part of that agreement. So the new instrument number with the new survey of that area, as Mrs. Breedlove had mentioned, she did not want to participate in that purchase agreement, as did the property owners to the west of her. So,
But as far as the city goes, as far as everything, we're legal, everything's right like it should be.
right. You know, when those issues were raised, we didn't treat them as conjecture. We looked into the drainage, we looked at the topography during that review of section 3B. I met with Mr. Ken Hedge, the Boone County Surveyor. I discussed this with Mr. Waples. We made sure there wasn't any present issues with the previous drainage approval.
The 15-foot drainage and utility easement along that north line, Rachel, are we saying that the swale falls within that? It's not half, I don't know how big the swale is, but it all falls within that utility easement?
I'd have to go back and take a look. I didn't bring section 3B plat. I do believe, Mr. Lieberman, if you want to address that, does the swale fit entirely within the 15-foot easement?
I'd say the swale is more of the property, not completely within.
Okay, so it does go along there. I know that Mr. Hedge had looked at that, his last year had significant rainfall, and so we just wanted to make sure it was adequate, and so I know he did take a look at that.
do you have any other questions for Rachel?
I do.
Oh, you didn't see the pictures of
Yeah, it was on it's on the video here,
It was on the screen.
on our screen, yes.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
no, it's good.
I guess I still have one or two questions for Rachel. When Mrs.
Okay.
Well, Rachel said that it was mitigated. Yeah. I am standing up to say it wasn't mitigated because there was flooding, which indicates that the swale is inadequate. If the swale had been adequate for the first rain after it was built, you wouldn't have had the flooding. The drain troughs were up. What are the drain troughs going to do when they're packed with snow and we have an ice storm? Which Ray Breedlove was my husband, and he worked city and REMC both, and it just goes right off the roof, okay? So that's why we didn't sell like the other two property owners did. And that's why we told Mr. Lieberman no. And he just took the property without respect for our ownership and our wishes. So if you want to say that's okay and mitigated, I think that's not right. And why should you have to have a civil lawsuit for your own property, especially if you're a low-income person? I could afford an attorney, and I did talk with an attorney, but I didn't hire him. But we said no. Ray said no. Ray's dead now. But he knew what would probably happen, and that's why we said no. And it was totally ignored. That's not mitigated.
So that, just to get some more perspective, when when a development like this goes in and you're gonna put in a swale along this north line in this dedicated easement, it doesn't have to all fall in there, or, I'm trying to understand, I'm trying to get a better picture of what the runoff was prior to development.
I would have to go back to the drainage review if you wanted that to be answered. As far as retention ponds or swales being outside of the easement, if they're going to be collective ponds for subdivision, this was a swale for this northern property line. This wasn't for retention for that entire area. It was to reprieve the situation. As you've kind of heard being inferred here, Mr. Lieberman tried to purchase parts of Mrs. Breedlove's property to increase the swale to help the drainage issue. She did not want to do that. She chose not to do that. So as far as the drainage, he put in the swale at the time that met the drainage standards. So we left it to the drainage experts to say that's the appropriate size swale to be installed. So,
What I'm gathering from the documents that you've put together, this swale would run would drain to the west over to the west property line, and then down, there's actually another drainage and utility easement that's gonna carry it south, and then it would eventually end up in this pond in the center, correct?
Bob, I don't know if you want to address that too.
It eventually goes to the pond that's at the south end.
Right. So there's a pattern all the way for it to run from the northeast, all the way to the west, all the way to the south. Okay, thank you.
Now, Rachel, he did purchase property on the other three.
Yes, he did, to the 3 property owners to the west, and we have that agreement here this evening, so he did purchase that.
To make that swell bigger.
Yes, he did that too. And there was when the original plat was done, there was a gap in the property descriptions, so to make sure to be amenable to those property owners, he purchased it. So that was done in September of 2010.
So where's Mrs. Breedlove's fence from the property line? Do we know?
I do not know where the fence is. I don't know if you want to address that, Bob, where the fence used to be on Mrs. Breedlove's property line.
I can't, it's been 10 years, I'm sorry.
He took it down.
Well, you got a new fence there now, right? There was an old fence and a new fence?
The old fence, I told him to take down because it was deteriorating.
Okay.
And we had a new fence. Well, it wouldn't have been new because it was probably at least 30 years old. And Ray put that up, but he put it beyond the old fence. So we never got any aerial views of, I don't know if the property line would have been considered with the old fence or not, but the new fence was way across. And that's where the middle of the swale is. On the east end of the swale, there is not a swale. It just, you can even see it on the pictures I took. It just runs down because a swale is a ditch. There's no ditch on the east end. So you can't even call it a swale.
In regard.
What you have to do is go look at it.
Sure. And in respect to Mrs. Breedlove, this is not germane to Section 3C this evening, which was 23 lots to the southwest of this. If Ms. Breedlove continues to have drainage issues, when I say mitigated, we reviewed that as far as the drainage plan and what was installed in the infrastructure during the approval of 3B about a year ago. Mrs. Breedlove wants to continue to work with the surveyor's office and with the stormwater division with the city. That is fine, but that is not prevalent to this hearing. So, thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions from anyone on the board? For Rachel or for anyone else is there anyone else that has any other comments from the audience? Hearing none, I'll ask for a vote for either a favorable recommendation here.
With the conditions as set forth by staff, please. Yep, thank you.
With conditions as described by staff.
You take into account the letter that you received, correct?
Correct, with the corrected instrument number. Yep.
So do we have a motion?
So moved.
I'll second.
We have a motion and a
Okay.
second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
Motion carries 5-0. Thank you.
Thank you. Rachel, do you have anything else for us tonight?
Just request your presence in the nice month of May. That's coming up on May 16th, because we'll have some items for you. We have 3 development plan petitions that we are going to be noticed and on the next agenda. So we appreciate for May 16th that you hold your calendar, because it's going to be busy.
Thank you. I'm looking for one more motion for this evening, I believe.
Make a motion, we adjourn?
I have a question. So if I decide to sue, I can sue the city so they approve for flooding and for stealth of property as well as Mr. Luderman. Is that correct? Is that my legal right?
You can talk to an attorney about what legal rights you should take as a point of recourse.
You seem to know it all.
We don't represent you as a private property owner. This is our city attorney representing the city.
Steal on my property.
I
And
know.
flood it. Thanks a lot.
Well, motion was made to adjourn.
Yeah.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Those opposed? It looks like the motion is carried. We thank you.